20 years ago, Tomoya Okazaki lost the meaning of life. For 5 long years, he wandered through life in pain and regret. But one simple sentence from his daughter awakened the responsibility of being a father once again. He poured all of his remaining love into Ushio, only to watch her collapse in his arms as well. At that moment, the unbearable grief completely crushed him. Tomoya lost all hope of continuing to live and closed his eyes in endless loneliness and sorrow. As his consciousness faded, memories began flowing through his mind one after another, finally stopping on the day he first met Nagisa Furukawa. From that moment onward, his once colorless life became filled with warmth and happiness. The two slowly grew closer, fell in love, and eventually got married. Not long after, Nagisa became pregnant. It should have been a joyful occasion, but Nagisa's mother warned Tomoya that because of Nagisa's weak health and past illnesses, the pregnancy could become dangerous. In severe cases, it might even threaten her life. Tomoya hesitated after hearing this, but Nagisa gently persuaded him, and in the end he accepted her decision. From then on, he cared for her even more carefully than before. Together, they chose a name for their child and promised that someday the three of them would go see the ocean together. However, fate had other plans. Nagisa suddenly went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected, while suffering from a terrible fever. At the same time, a violent snowstorm struck the town, paralyzing transportation and making it impossible to reach the hospital. Seeing Nagisa writhing in pain, Tomoya felt helpless and terrified. Thankfully, Nagisa's parents managed to bring in a retired midwife to help with the delivery. Without pain relief, the natural childbirth became agonizing. Nagisa repeatedly lost consciousness from the pain, only to wake up again moments later because of the suffering. After what felt like an endless struggle, the cry of a newborn finally echoed through the house. Ushio was born. But before Tomoya could share the joy with Nagisa, he realized something was wrong. Exhausted and weak, Nagisa softly whispered that she just needed to rest for a little while longer. Tomoya desperately called out to her again and again, trying to keep her awake. He spoke about the future they would have together, watching Ushio grow up, going to school events together, and spending time as a happy family. But Nagisa never answered him again. Her death completely destroyed Tomoya. The colorful world he once regained became gray once more. He started living like a machine, going to work every day and burying himself in endless labor just to escape the pain. Whenever he wasn't working, the loneliness became unbearable. He drowned himself in gambling, smoking, and self-destruction. In the end, Tomoya slowly became the same kind of father he once hated. 5 years passed like this. One day, Nagisa's mother suddenly visited him and invited him on a trip. Tomoya originally refused, but after repeated persuasion, he reluctantly agreed. The next day, when he arrived with his luggage, he discovered the house was empty. All that remained was a note saying, "We'll leave the rest to you," along with 2 train tickets. At that moment, footsteps approached from behind him. It was Ushio. For the past 5 years, Tomoya had neglected his own daughter and left her entirely in Nagisa's parents' care. Even now, during this rare opportunity to spend time together, he could barely look at her. He simply told her to play by herself. Yet Ushio quietly obeyed without complaining or crying. Later that afternoon, the two shared a simple meal of fried rice. But because Tomoya added pepper, Ushio politely asked for plain rice instead and mixed in seasoning by herself to eat it. Her maturity and quiet behavior only made the adults around her feel more heartbroken. After spending the night, Nagisa's parents still had not returned home. With nothing else to do, Tomoya and Ushio sat silently near the entrance. Eventually, Tomoya decided to stop waiting and asked Ushio if she still wanted to go on the trip. Since they were alone, it would have to be just the two of them. Ushio happily nodded. And so, father and daughter began their first journey together. But trouble appeared almost immediately after boarding the train. A noisy child nearby kept crying for his mother, and hearing the repeated cries of "Mom" irritated Tomoya deeply. Unable to hold back his frustration, he suddenly shouted at the child. His angry outburst shocked everyone around him, including Ushio. When Tomoya turned around, he realized Ushio had disappeared. Panicking, he searched through the train cars until he finally saw Ushio stepping out of the restroom with tears in her eyes. Tomoya noticed Ushio's red eyes and asked if she had been crying. But Ushio quietly shook her head. She explained that her grandmother once told her she was not allowed to cry, and that if she absolutely had to, she should only cry in a special place. After hesitating for a moment, Ushio softly admitted that the restroom was probably that place. At first, Tomoya did not think much about it. He simply assumed she hid there because nobody would notice her crying. Still, after a moment of silence, he gently told Ushio that if she wanted to cry, she should just cry. After all, once people grow up, there are times when they want to cry but no tears come out anymore. When they arrived at the next stop on their journey, Tomoya bought Ushio a small robot toy. Surprisingly, despite being a little girl, Ushio loved it immediately. Later, while walking toward the hotel, Tomoya noticed that Ushio kept glancing at him as if she wanted to say something. He told her she could speak freely and promised he would not yell anymore. Only then did Ushio quietly ask about her mother. Tomoya froze for a moment before sadly telling her to ask Sanai instead. After saying that, he turned and walked away. That night, he lay awake watching his daughter sleep, unable to close his eyes. The next day, they followed the route prepared for them and arrived at a beautiful field covered in golden flowers. Ushio ran joyfully through the field while carrying her robot toy, happier than Tomoya had ever seen her before. Tomoya rested beneath a nearby tree and watched silently. But before long, Ushio returned looking upset. She had lost the robot. Tomoya joined her in searching through the flower field, but no matter how hard they looked, they could not find it. Eventually, Tomoya suggested giving up and promised to buy her a new one on the way home. However, Ushio stubbornly refused. She insisted that she wanted that particular robot. Seeing how determined she was, Tomoya stopped trying to persuade her and sat back under the tree. As he watched Ushio desperately searching through the flowers, a strange feeling of familiarity suddenly rose within him. Almost unconsciously, he followed that feeling up a nearby hill. There, he encountered an elderly woman who immediately recognized him. To Tomoya's surprise, she was the mother of Naoyuki Okazaki, his grandmother. It turned out that this meeting had not been a coincidence at all. Sanai and Akio had arranged everything beforehand. Confused, Tomoya asked if they had met before. His grandmother explained that he had visited this place as a child, shortly after his mother passed away. Back then, Naoyuki had been exactly like Tomoya was now. She then began telling him about his father's past. Naoyuki and Tomoya's mother had married while they were still students. Although everyone around them strongly opposed their relationship, Naoyuki chose to leave school so the two of them could start a life together in a small apartment. Their life was difficult, but as long as they were together, they were happy. Soon afterward, Tomoya was born. But that happiness did not last long. Tomoya's mother passed away shortly after his birth, and from that moment onward, Naoyuki's entire life changed. Even so, he knew he could not fall into despair because his young son still needed him. He swore to raise Tomoya properly, as a final promise to his late wife. Those years became the hardest and most exhausting period of Naoyuki's life. To support Tomoya, he endured endless hardships, changed jobs repeatedly, and struggled every single day. Yet no matter how painful life became, he never once thought about giving up on his son. In exchange, however, he gradually sacrificed almost everything about himself. The loneliness and exhaustion inside him had nowhere to go, so he slowly turned to alcohol to escape the pain. By the time Tomoya was old enough to choose his own path in life, Naoyuki himself had already lost nearly everything. As his grandmother continued speaking, Tomoya slowly remembered fragments of his childhood, his father buying snacks for him, holding his hand during walks, and trying his best to make him smile. Tomoya could not understand why he had forgotten all of those precious memories. Then his grandmother asked him a simple question. Was Naoyuki really such a terrible father? Without hesitation, Tomoya shook his head. Compared to his father, he felt that he himself was far more unworthy. They had both stood in the exact same position, yet Naoyuki had continued fighting for his child, while Tomoya had run away from Ushio for 5 entire years. His grandmother smiled softly and admitted that Naoyuki was weak and clumsy too. But despite all of his flaws, he still did everything he possibly could for his son. As a person, he may have made many mistakes, but as a father, he was truly admirable. At that moment, Tomoya finally understood and forgave his father. Before leaving, his grandmother asked him for one final favor. She said that Naoyuki had suffered long enough and deserved to rest now. She wanted Tomoya to tell him to come home because she would always be waiting for him there. When Tomoya returned to the flower field, Ushio was still searching tearfully through the flowers for her lost robot. Watching her small figure desperately looking around, countless memories flooded through his mind. For the first time in years, Tomoya spoke to his daughter with genuine warmth. He gently told Ushio that maybe they would never find the toy and offered once again to buy her a new one. But Ushio quietly shook her head. "That one is special," she said. Tomoya asked why, since there were many others just like it in stores. Ushio then answered softly, "Because it's the first gift Daddy ever chose for me." At that moment, Tomoya's heart completely broke. Ushio looked up at him with a small smile. "Dad?" "Yes. It's been a long time." Then she smiled even more brightly and said, "I'm really happy that we got to go on this trip together." Tomoya quietly answered Ushio with a gentle, "Yeah." Ushio looked up at him nervously and asked if she could stay by his side from now on. Tomoya's expression trembled with guilt as he admitted that he had been a terrible father for a very long time. But from now on, he promised he would truly try his best. "So, can I stay with you?" Ushio asked once more. Tomoya nodded. "Of course." "Really?" "Yes." Hearing those words, Ushio smiled happily. But then her expression suddenly changed, and she quietly admitted that she had been holding something important back all this time. "Dad." Before she could finish, her emotions finally overflowed. Tears streamed down her face as she buried herself in Tomoya's chest. Remembering what Sanai had once told her, Ushio cried while trembling in his arms. Grandma said, "It's okay to cry either in the bathroom or in Daddy's arms." At that moment, Tomoya finally embraced his daughter properly for the first time in years as the two cried together beneath the endless sky. On the train ride home, Tomoya began telling Ushio stories about Nagisa. He explained that her mother had always looked as though she might burst into tears at any moment. When they first met, Nagisa had been standing alone at the bottom of the school hill, nervously mumbling red bean bread to herself with her eyes closed. It turned out that whenever she needed courage, she would say the names of foods she loved. Ushio listened with sparkling eyes and kept asking Tomoya to continue talking about her mother. As Tomoya spoke, memories of Nagisa continued flooding back into his heart, her smile, her kindness, her awkwardness, and the warmth she brought into his life. Overcome with emotion, Tomoya suddenly apologized. "I'm sorry. I almost forgot about your mother." Then, through tears, he realized something important at last. He had finally found the thing he needed to protect. The thing most precious to him. After that journey, the darkness that had consumed Tomoya for years finally began to fade away. His relationship with Ushio grew warmer and closer, and seeing the genuine smiles on both their faces filled Sanai and Akio with relief and happiness. Later, Tomoya took Ushio to visit Nagisa's grave together. Returning once again to the familiar yet distant home he once shared with Nagisa, countless memories resurfaced in his mind. Although the pain of losing her still remained, it was no longer something that only brought despair. Instead, it became the strength that pushed him forward to protect Ushio. Tomoya sincerely apologized to Sanai and Akio for abandoning Ushio and leaving them to shoulder everything alone for the past 5 years. At the same time, he thanked them for helping him rediscover what it truly meant to be a father. From now on, he promised that he would raise Ushio himself and help her grow into a girl just as gentle and strong as Nagisa. However, Tomoya still did not fully understand how much pain Sanai and Akio themselves had endured during those 5 years. Only late one quiet night, when he accidentally overheard their conversation, did he finally realize that he had not been the only one suffering all this time. That night, Sanai finally broke down in tears. For years, she had forced herself to stay strong for everyone else, but now the emotions she had buried deep inside finally overflowed. Akio gently comforted her, telling her not to cry anymore because he would always stay by her side and support her no matter what happened. The next day, Tomoya brought Ushio to visit Naoyuki. Seeing how old and exhausted his father had become, countless memories surged through Tomoya's mind. So many words gathered in his throat, yet in the end, all he could manage to say was, "Dad." Tomoya told Naoyuki about meeting his grandmother and relayed her message. He thanked his father for everything he had done over the years and said that Naoyuki had already carried enough burdens for one lifetime. It was finally time for him to rest because his mother was waiting for him back home. Naoyuki quietly listened in silence. Then Tomoya looked directly at him and spoke from the heart. "You sacrificed everything to raise me, even for a useless son like me. You spent your entire life for my sake. That's already more than enough." Hearing those words, Naoyuki could no longer hold back his emotions. That night, father and son bathed together alongside Ushio. Tomoya carefully scrubbed his father's back, just like Naoyuki used to do for him when he was a child. For the first time in many years, the distance between them finally disappeared. The following morning, Tomoya helped pack his father's luggage and reminded him to stay safe on the journey home. It felt as though he was finally taking over the responsibilities Naoyuki had carried alone for so long. But when the moment of parting truly arrived, Tomoya still could not stop the tears gathering in his eyes. Naoyuki awkwardly reminded him not to smoke too much or neglect his health, speaking just like a father worried about his son. Tomoya quietly apologized for everything and promised that he would definitely come visit again with Ushio. "We'll come together next time," he said. Naoyuki nodded gently. As they prepared to separate, Tomoya suddenly noticed tears running down his father's face. "Dad, why are you crying?" Naoyuki lowered his head before finally whispering, "Sorry, son." Tomoya immediately shook his head and told him there was nothing to apologize for anymore. At last, after years of resentment, regret, and distance, the two finally understood each other as father and son. As Tomoya watched Naoyuki's figure slowly disappear into the distance, a question quietly rose in his heart. Had his father's life truly been a happy one? At the moment Naoyuki had been happiest, he lost the woman he loved most. After that, he spent the rest of his entire life sacrificing everything for his ungrateful son. After that day, Tomoya worked harder than ever before. The moment work ended, he would rush to pick Ushio up. The two spent every day together, walking side by side, eating meals together, making new friends, and even playing card games at home. Whenever Ushio could not sleep at night, Tomoya would sing Nagisa's favorite song, the Dango Daikazoku. Little by little, the sorrow Nagisa left behind began fading through the warmth the two shared together. At last, life slowly started returning to its peaceful rhythm. Before long, Ushio's kindergarten sports festival was approaching. Akio became strangely competitive and began training every day for the event, while Tomoya, unwilling to lose, started preparing himself as well. But just before the sports festival arrived, Ushio suddenly collapsed. Panicked, Tomoya rushed her to the doctor. After examining her, the doctor discovered that Ushio suffered from the same mysterious illness Nagisa once had, an incurable condition that would continue returning over and over again. Hearing those words shattered Tomoya's heart. Looking at Ushio sleeping weakly in bed, he could only blame himself and desperately pray for her recovery. But days passed. Then weeks. Then an entire month. Yet Ushio's fever never disappeared. Eventually, she became too weak even to leave her room. Wanting to stay beside her at all times, Tomoya quit his job to care for her personally. Although he considered admitting her to a hospital, there was no treatment available anyway, and more importantly, Ushio wanted to stay at home with him. As autumn passed into winter, Ushio's condition continued worsening. Some days she seemed slightly better, while on others she could barely move at all. Wanting to ease her suffering even a little, Tomoya asked if there was anything she wanted. But instead of toys or presents, Ushio quietly answered that she wanted to go on another trip. She wanted to ride the train together with her father again. Hearing that wish pierced deeply into Tomoya's heart. Looking at the hope in Ushio's eyes, he forced himself to smile and promised they would go once she recovered. But Ushio no longer wanted to wait. She wanted to return to the flower field immediately. For the first time, Tomoya saw an unusual determination in his daughter's frail face. He wanted to refuse, knowing how dangerous it was, but the words would not come out. In the end, he agreed. Being able to go outside again made Ushio incredibly happy. Tomoya wanted to carry her on his back, but Ushio stubbornly insisted on walking by herself. However, her body had become far too weak. After only a few shaky steps, she nearly collapsed. At that exact moment, snow suddenly began falling from the sky. Tomoya quickly caught Ushio before she fell completely. As the snowstorm grew heavier around them, Ushio weakly looked up at him. "Dad. What's wrong, Ushio? Where are we going?" Tomoya gently smiled and answered, "We're on the train now. It's nighttime." Ushio quietly nodded. Then, with her fading voice, she softly whispered, "I love you." Tomoya immediately replied through trembling tears, "I love Ushio too, very much." But moments later, Ushio's body suddenly went limp in his arms. Tomoya froze. Then he desperately called her name again and again. "Ushio? Ushio!" Tomoya shouted desperately for anyone nearby to help Ushio. His voice trembled with fear as memories of Nagisa's death resurfaced in his mind. He could not endure losing another person he loved. Panic completely consumed him as he held her tiny body tightly against the falling snow. "No, I don't want this. Someone, please help Ushio." His cries echoed helplessly through the empty white landscape.